This show, along with hundreds of others from Calaroga Shark Media, is available commercial-free on any player, hassle-free. Just look for the link in the episode or show notes.
Calaroga Shark Media. Hello and welcome to Ghost. This episode is titled The Lingering Spirit of Beatlemania.
It was a crisp autumn evening in Adelaide as Michael Parker, the general manager of the Centennial Hall, made his nightly rounds. He made sure all the backstage doors were locked and the stage lights properly turned off after that night's performance. As Michael passed through the empty auditorium, an eerie chill went down his spine. He couldn't quite shake the persistent feeling that they weren't alone. Strange, inexplicable occurrences had been happening at the historic theatre with increasing frequency over the past few years. Objects going missing and then reappearing in odd places. The faint sound of 1960s rock music echoing through the halls when no one was around. Ghostly laughter and screams of jubilation emanating from the auditorium certain nights. At first, Michael and the theatre staff just chalked it up to one of Adelaide's many haunted folklore tales. But the supernatural incidents kept occurring, seemingly centered around Centennial Hall's legendary claim to fame. The Beatles had played there on June 17, 1964, during their record-breaking Australasian tour. On that fateful evening nearly 6 decades ago, delirious Beatlemania gripped the streets outside Centennial Hall as thousands of frantic fans desperately tried to catch a glimpse of John, Paul, George and Ringo. Inside, the roar of 4,000 screaming audience members was deafening as the Fab Four took the stage for 2 back-to-back shows that night. According to reports from the time, the mass hysteria had never been seen before on such a breathtaking scale in Australia. Police were overwhelmed trying to control the sobbing, raving hordes of besotted teenagers. One young woman even managed to sneak past security and make it all the way to the visitors' dressing room before being hauled off by authorities. Her name was Sarah Gilbert, an 18-year-old die-hard Beatles fan whose idolization for the band had reached unfathomable heights of frenzied obsession. As Sarah was forcibly removed from the venue that evening, she repeatedly screamed, "I want to marry Paul! He's my one true soulmate!" while frantically fighting against the iron grip of the burly security guards. In the 58 years since that pivotal Beatlemania event, Sarah's tragic story had faded into local lore and folklore. Her great-niece Emily, now in her 60s, shared the family tales of how Sarah remained a spinster for life, despite biological and societal pressures to marry and have a family of her own. She stubbornly refused to ever take a husband, insisting that no man could ever match the perfection of her destined husband, Paul McCartney. Sarah passed away a lonely, embittered woman in her 70s during the late 1990s, but Emily and many in Adelaide's old rock and roll circles believe her restless, yearning spirit still lingers at Centennial Hall to this day, still desperate to somehow connect with the object of her lifelong Beatles mania fixation. It was on one of these quiet evenings during October 2022 that Michael first encountered the strange phenomena himself. He was taking a shortcut through the main auditorium when he stopped dead in his tracks, his blood freezing in his veins. There in the center aisle, he saw the unmistakable apparition of a young woman dressed in 1960s clothing, hovering about 6 inches off the ground. Michael immediately recognized her from the famous old photographs commemorating the Beatles' historic performance at the theatre nearly 60 years prior. It was the ghostly form of Sarah Gilbert, She seemed to be staring intently at the vacant stage, her eyes brimming with desperation and longing as she clutched an old Beatles record album to her chest. Just as Michael began retreating in horror, a blaring electric guitar riff suddenly exploded from the theatre's sound system, startling him. Before his eyes, psychedelic hazy lights began flashing and shifting around Sarah's ghostly outline in vivid reds, blues, and greens. The unmistakable opening chords of I Want to Hold Your Hand came thundering through the speakers at ear-splitting volumes. Sarah's spirit instantly came alive, whipping her head around as if searching for the source of the iconic Beatles music. Translucent tears of joy streamed down her face as she opened her mouth in a breathless, silent scream of rapturous elation. In that surreal moment, Michael realized there was nothing malicious about this apparition. This was simply the restless spirit of a die-hard Beatles fan who never got the closure she desperately craved all those decades ago. After that first encounter, the ghostly manifestations continued regularly at Centennial Hall. The apparition of Sarah would appear most vividly during the late evening hours, sometimes accompanied by those strange sounds of music, screams and laughter from the past. While unnerving at times, Michael and the staff eventually came to look upon the phenomena with a sense of empathy and acceptance. If anything, the haunting became an inextricable part of Centennial Hall's Beatles lore, an appeal to die-hard fans. The theatre even started selling commemorative I Met Sarah's Ghost t-shirts in the lobby. One night during a special Beatles cover show, as the actors launched into the iconic opening lines of Hey Jude, a hushed silence fell over the captivated audience. There in the center aisle, Sarah's ghostly form had materialized, swaying and mouthing the words in rapt reverie. After the performance, one of the actors reported feeling a strange, placid presence beside him during his encore reprisal of Hey Jude. When he looked down during the iconic final line, "The movement you need is on your shoulder," he saw a faint spectral hand resting there. From the balcony seating, several awestruck audience members captured footage of Sarah's ethereal outline, dancing and spinning with wild abandon during that encore, appearing to mouth "na na na" repeatedly in pure ecstatic bliss. In the days after, feeling a profound sense of clarity and acceptance wash over her like never before, Sarah's spirit began appearing less and less frequently around the venue. It was as if she had finally achieved the spiritual release and closure she had spent literal decades vainly seeking in the afterlife. During Centennial Hall's next major Beatles cover show a month later, the atmosphere was alive with anticipation that Sarah's ghost might make another appearance. But despite several sensations of a presence in the auditorium that evening, her spirit manifestation never materialized. In the backstage green room after the performance, the lead singer said he could have sworn he felt an invisible, gentle touch on his shoulder as the final "na na na na" chorus closed out their encore. Turning around, the singer saw no one else in the room, but noticed a single long lock of red hair lying on the floor, the same vibrant red shade Sarah Gilbert had many decades ago. Whether a final parting trace of her journey's end or merely coincidence, no definitive explanation was given for the strange hair relic found backstage that night. It remains part of the paranormal folklore that makes Centennial Hall an enduring cultural gem for music history buffs and ghost storytellers alike. These days, Michael and his staff carry on their duties unbothered by any further manifestations of Beatlemania's biggest fan. Perhaps Sarah's spirit found its ultimate peace and bliss that fabled night. Or maybe her form still lingers, watching and swaying quietly in the shadowed rafters whenever the timeless melodies of her heroes echo through Centennial Hall once more. One thing is certain. Thanks to an otherworldly devotion beyond the grave, the euphoric madness of Beatlemania will never truly die at 59 Falcon Street in Adelaide. For the haunting echoes of one love-struck fan's desperate screams of joy will be forever inextricably intertwined with that fateful evening when the Beatles played Centennial Hall.
Ghost is a Calaroga Shark Media production, written and hosted by Alexander Ian McIntyre, produced by Mark Francis, executive producers Mark Francis and John McDermott. Portions of this podcast may have been created with the assistance of AI.
Facts about this actual Australian concert have been changed for entertainment purposes.
Calaroga Shark Media.